Somewhere beyond the edge of the city, hidden deep in the northern woods, stood a mansion so enormous, it looked more like a museum than a home. A twisting private road led up to it, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to swallow every sound. No cell service, no neighbors for miles, just silence, cold, heavy silence. The first guest arrived just before sunset. A black SUV dropped her off at the iron gates. Her name was Amber Cole, early 30s, sharp-dressed, all business. She adjusted her blazer, took a deep breath, and walked up the gravel path with the posture of someone used to hiding nerves. But behind her dark sunglasses, her eyes scanned the towering estate with a flicker of uncertainty. She had never met Daniel Cross. The invitation had come by mail, no return address, just a handwritten note, a weekend to reset. No press, no pressure, no phones. She wasn't the only one. One by one, the others showed up. An aging man in a leather jacket who smelled faintly of whiskey. He called himself Victor. A quiet woman with a nervous twitch, Clara, who clutched a small duffel bag like her life depended on it. Then came Jace, a loud-mouthed self-help influencer with fake confidence and two white teeth. And finally, a teenager, barely 19, named Eli, who didn't say much but kept glancing over his shoulder like someone might be following him. 5 strangers, all invited, all confused, none of them knew why they were there. Inside, the mansion was just as strange. Every surface gleamed. Marble floors, tall mirrors, abstract art on every wall. There were no staff. No signs of life except for the soft hum of hidden security cameras mounted in the corners of each room. At the center of the grand foyer stood a table with 5 identical envelopes. Each one had a name written in perfect cursive. No one dared open theirs first until Amber, with her usual calm authority, reached out and broke the silence. She read aloud, "Welcome. You've been given a rare opportunity. This weekend is not about who you were, but about who you can become. By the end, only one of you will truly understand why you're here." The words sent a chill through the room. Jace laughed it off, tossing his envelope aside like it was a joke. But Victor didn't laugh. He stared at his message like it was written in blood. Clara quietly slipped hers into her bag without reading it, and Eli's hands trembled as he held his. There was something about the handwriting that made him visibly uncomfortable, like he recognized it. An hour passed. Then 2. The guests explored the mansion, some out of curiosity, others to find clues. There were dozens of rooms, each more extravagant than the last. A theater, a library, a heated indoor pool. But there was something odd, too many locked doors. One hallway seemed to curve longer than it should. Amber noticed that some rooms had shifted furniture between visits, as if the house was alive and rearranging itself. Then, as darkness crept in through the stained glass windows, a soft voice crackled through hidden speakers. "Good evening," it said. Calm, cold, "I'm Daniel Cross. Thank you for accepting my invitation. This house has been waiting for you." They gathered in the main sitting room, where a massive screen lowered from the ceiling. On it played a video, grainy footage from a hidden camera, showing an old restaurant. In the footage, Clara could be seen yelling at a coworker. It was loud, angry, and then suddenly the video cut off. Everyone stared at her. Her face had gone pale. "What the hell is this?" Jace asked. "Some kind of reality show prank." No answer came. That night, none of them slept well. Amber lay awake in her guest suite, unable to shake the feeling that she was being watched. She remembered the note. No phones. There were none. Not even landlines. Every digital clock in the mansion flashed the same time. 12 o'clock. Frozen. She tried the front door. Locked. The windows? Bolted. This wasn't a weekend getaway. It was a trap. Meanwhile, Eli sat in the library, staring at a wall of books he wasn't reading. He recognized the handwriting in the envelope. He hadn't seen it in over 4 years. It belonged to someone he thought was dead. Down the hall, Clara heard whispers behind the walls. Not voices, but muffled crying. She pressed her ear to the wallpaper and could almost make out a name being whispered. A name she hadn't said out loud since that night, the night everything changed. Victor wandered alone, carrying a flask in one hand and something heavier in his heart. He stopped in front of a painting, a woman standing in a field. He stared for a long time. Then, under his breath, he muttered, "I didn't mean to." In the morning, one of them was gone. No blood, no sign of a struggle, just an empty room, with the bed still made in a fresh envelope left behind. On it, just 2 words, one down. Panic set in. The mansion, once luxurious, now felt like a cage. Tempers flared. Accusations flew. Clara accused Jace. Jace blamed Victor. Amber tried to keep the peace, but her composure was cracking. No one knew who to trust or what Daniel Cross really wanted. Then the screen dropped again. This time, it showed a different clip. Security footage from a high school hallway. A fight. Amber was in it. She pushed someone, hard, into a locker. There was yelling, then silence. The footage cut before the impact. No explanation, just enough to raise questions. Daniel's voice returned. Everyone in this house has taken something. A life, a future, a truth. You think you've hidden it, but justice has a long memory. The guests looked at each other with new fear. They weren't strangers anymore. They were suspects, targets, or maybe the guilty. The door to the dining room creaked open on its own. Inside, the table was set for 4. One seat had been removed. Then, another envelope. This one read, "Your past has found you. The weekend has just begun." The guests stared at one another. No one moved. No one wanted to know what came next. But deep down, they all understood one thing. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about being watched and judged. Amber didn't touch her food. The dining room, once warm with the golden glow of chandeliers, now felt sterile. The silverware was arranged too perfectly, the chairs too symmetrical. Every part of the mansion was beginning to feel staged, like a set built to watch them unravel. The empty chair where Jace had sat just hours ago gnawed at her nerves. His room was cleared, his things gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Victor leaned back in his seat, his arms crossed, eyes flicking between the others. He wasn't eating either. "I don't know what kind of mind game this is," he muttered, "but I've survived worse. Whoever's behind this is just trying to spook us." His voice had the rough edge of someone who'd seen enough in life to doubt anything good could come from a weekend like this. Clara stayed quiet, her fork frozen in midair. She hadn't said a word since they found the second envelope. Her eyes looked hollow, haunted, as if she was trying not to remember something. Eli, still the youngest and least certain of the group, picked at his plate without focus. He kept glancing toward the hallway, as if expecting someone or something to walk in. Later that afternoon, Amber slipped away from the others and went back to the library. Something about the space drew her in, but it wasn't comfort she found. It was the silence. She pulled books off the shelves at random, flipping through the pages. Notes were scribbled in some margins. Dates, names, even phrases that didn't make sense. On the inside cover of a thick medical ethics book, someone had written, "He knew what we did." Her fingers went cold. Meanwhile, Clara stood in front of a locked door at the end of the west wing. She didn't remember seeing it before. The doorknob was older than the rest, rasped, tarnished, cold to the touch. She pressed her ear against the wood and swore she heard breathing, soft, almost rhythmic. Then it stopped. She stepped back quickly, her pulse spiking. Victor, on the other hand, had found the wine cellar, or what was left of it. It had been stripped clean, shelves empty except for one single bottle in the center. No label. Just a black glass body and a red wax seal. He didn't open it. Not yet. Something about it felt deliberate, like a message he couldn't read. He stayed there a long time, trying to remember a face he hadn't thought of in years. A kid. A name. One tied to a night he drank too much and walked away from something he shouldn't have. As night fell, the mansion dimmed again. Lights flickered. The rooms seemed to stretch. Eli found himself in a hallway that didn't match the map he'd drawn earlier. Doors were repeating. He passed the same painting 3 times, a portrait of a faceless man standing in the shadows. When he tried to retrace his steps, he ended up somewhere new entirely, a small room with mirrored walls. And in the center, a tablet screen lit up with a single word, liar. Eli's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't told the others everything. Not about why he came. Not about the letter he received before Daniel's invitation. The one that simply read, "Your past didn't drown." It floated. He'd shredded it and burned the pieces in a panic, but now he wasn't so sure he'd ever escaped it. Downstairs, Amber gathered the others, her face tight with urgency. "This house is moving," she said. "I've measured. Doors lead to different rooms than they did yesterday. Hallways stretch longer. This isn't just surveillance, it's manipulation." Victor frowned. "We're being hunted, then?" "No," Amber replied. "We're being studied." That night, another video played. This time, there was no announcement, no warning, just the sound of static, then grainy footage filling the screen in the lounge. It showed Victor, a much younger version of him, late at night, behind the wheel of a car, slurring his words. The camera wobbled, like it had been taken from a dash cam. Then, out of nowhere, headlights, a scream. A crash, the footage cut. Victor stood up fast, knocking over a lamp. "That's enough," he barked. His hands trembled. "You can't show that. No one was supposed to know." Amber looked at him carefully. "You left someone behind that night, didn't you?" Victor's jaw locked. "I didn't mean to." No one said anything for a long moment. The house seemed to listen. Eli retreated again to the library. He needed space to breathe. Instead, he found another envelope, tucked into the spine of a book on childhood trauma. Inside was a photo, old weathered. Him as a child, standing at the edge of a lake, holding hands with a girl who wasn't his sister. On the back, someone had written, "You let her go." His chest tightened. He remembered that day. He remembered the scream, the way the water swallowed her, the way no one ever asked questions, because no one ever saw them together. Elsewhere, Clara began searching through the basement. She hadn't spoken up, hadn't tried to defend herself after her video played. But she was driven now, like someone looking for proof that she wasn't going crazy. In one of the storage rooms, she found an old chest covered in dust. It groaned open to reveal items none of them had seen before. A broken bracelet, a burned ID card, a name tag from a nursing home with the name L. Becker. Her mother's name. She dropped it and backed away. Daniel Cross hadn't invited strangers. He'd invited ghosts. By the third night, the group had stopped pretending this was anything but punishment. The luxurious mansion was just a mask for something darker. Each of them had skeletons, yes, but someone had dragged those bones into the open. Someone wanted them to suffer, to be seen, and maybe to confess. The screens throughout the house began to flicker with the same image, a digital countdown. 12 hours, no explanation, no context. Amber gathered them again. "We need to find the control room. Cameras, audio, everything is being run from somewhere. We find Daniel." Victor rubbed his face. "What if he's not here?" "He's watching," Clara whispered. "He's always watching." As they split up again, the storm outside grew stronger. Thunder echoed through the long halls. The house creaked under the weight of secrets. Doors slammed without wind. Voices whispered behind walls. And then, one more envelope appeared. This time, it was taped to a mirror in Amber's room. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single sentence. "Even you, Amber, especially you." She stared at it for a long time, her face unreadable. Then she walked over to her suitcase, pulled out a small hidden pouch, and took something out that none of the others knew she had. A key. One Daniel Cross had given her, years ago, before he disappeared. She hadn't told them everything either. And the real reason she came this weekend wasn't to find the truth. It was to bury it. Amber slipped the key into her pocket, heart thudding in a steady, nervous rhythm. She didn't look at the others as she passed through the hallway, just kept walking, pretending she didn't feel the weight of the house pressing in around her. She'd buried her connection to Daniel Cross deep for a reason. Back then, it was easier to pretend she was just one of the many people who had crossed his path. But Daniel hadn't forgotten. Not after what happened the last time they spoke. Upstairs, Victor paced alone in one of the guest rooms, haunted by the footage that had exposed his darkest night. He kept replaying the crash, the scream, the way he staggered from the wreck and didn't look back. He thought no one would find out, but someone had, and now he wondered if Jace's disappearance was just the beginning. He kept checking the walls for hidden cameras, hoping to spot the eyes watching them, but the house gave nothing away. He opened every drawer, pulled back curtains, even unscrewed an outlet. Still nothing. In another wing, Eli found Clara curled up in a velvet armchair, eyes locked on the old name tag she had discovered. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she turned the tag over and over in her fingers. Eli sat across from her without saying anything at first. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, charged with everything unspoken. Finally, Clara broke it. "He put her there," she whispered. "That nursing home. It was the only place that would take her after what I did." Eli didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded slowly, knowing they were all dancing around some old guilt that had never gone away. "I used her. For years, I kept her money, told myself it was for her care. But really, it was just to live better. She didn't even recognize me by the end," Clara said, voice cracking. "But someone knew, and they're making sure I remember now." The truth was starting to crack through each of them. The secrets were rising, clawing their way to the surface. But still, none of them understood how Daniel Cross was orchestrating it, or why. While the others sat in their guilt and fear, Amber moved quietly through the east corridor, key in hand. She stopped at a decorative mirror near the end of the hall. To everyone else, it was just a fancy piece of decor, but she knew better. She pressed the side panel with her palm. There was a click. The mirror slid to the side, revealing a narrow stone staircase leading downward into the dark. She glanced back once to make sure she wasn't followed, then descended. Below the mansion, the air shifted, cooler, damp, tinged with something old. The passage wound into what looked like an abandoned wing. Dust blanketed everything, but the security equipment was still on. Old monitors flickering with static, camera feeds jumping from one hallway to another, night vision tracking movements upstairs. In the center of the room sat a single chair, empty but pointed at a wall of screens. And pinned to the backrest was another envelope, with her name on it. Amber hesitated, then opened it. Inside were surveillance photos of her, from years ago, walking into an office, meeting Daniel, leaving a hotel at night. In the last one, she was standing outside the same mansion, only it was covered in snow, and she was holding the same key now in her pocket. Written across the bottom, "We had a deal." She sank into the chair, stomach twisting. She'd helped Daniel once, long ago, when he first started building his security empire. She was supposed to protect people, but then he offered her a choice, stay loyal or disappear. She'd chosen herself. She thought it was over, but Daniel hadn't forgotten. Back upstairs, Victor and Eli were arguing. The stress was boiling over. Victor wanted to leave, to break a window if he had to, but Eli was convinced the house wouldn't let them. The layout had changed again. Doorways weren't where they were before. Even the exits seemed to vanish. Eli showed Victor his hand-drawn map, now completely useless. "We're not just being watched," Eli said, his voice rising. "We're being redirected, like rats in a maze." Victor grabbed the map and tore it in half. "We're not rats." But deep down, he was starting to believe they were, and that someone was pulling strings he couldn't see. Meanwhile, Clara had gone quiet again. She was staring at her reflection in a hallway mirror, but something felt off. Her reflection didn't match her movements, not immediately. There was a lag, a glitch. Then the mirror flashed black for a split second and showed her a scene, a hospital room. Her mother in a bed, a monitor flatlining. She stumbled back in horror, and the mirror returned to normal. No one else saw it. Back in the control room, Amber flipped through more files. One folder had detailed psychological profiles of everyone in the house. Personal histories, therapy notes, court records, things she had no idea Daniel had access to. But the strangest thing was, there was one file missing, Jace. There was no information on him at all. She checked every cabinet, every drawer. Nothing. She stood up, suddenly lightheaded. If Jace was in the system, maybe he hadn't been a guest. Maybe he was part of it. Just then, a hidden speaker in the room crackled to life. "You came back, Amber," Daniel's voice echoed, distorted and calm. "You were always the one who understood the value of control." Her breath caught. He was watching, still here, still pulling strings. "You all thought this was about punishment," he said. "It's not. It's about balance." She backed away, heart pounding, but the speaker had gone silent. Above her, chaos was spreading. Lights were flickering again. Doors were slamming shut. Clara was screaming. She'd seen someone in the hallway, but when she turned the corner, no one was there. Victor was trying to pry open a boarded-up window with a broken chair leg. Eli was calling out Jace's name, swearing he heard him whispering from one of the walls. The mansion had come alive. Amber burst into the hallway, pale and breathless. "It's not just about us," she said. "There's something else going on. Someone in here doesn't belong. And Daniel? He's not done with us yet." Victor looked at her like he wanted answers, but before he could speak, the power in the house surged, and every screen turned on at once. Each showed the same live feed, the front door. Standing just inside was Jace, but he wasn't trying to escape. He was staring directly into the camera, smiling, and in his hand was a second key, identical to Amber's. Victor stepped away from the glowing screen, his face tight with disbelief. "He's in on it," he muttered. "Jace was never one of us." The others stood frozen, watching the feed repeat, Jace still, silent, holding the key like it meant more than they could yet understand. Eli turned toward Amber. "What does that mean? Why does he have the same key as you?" Amber didn't answer right away. She was watching Jace's eyes. Even through the grainy footage, there was something unsettling about them, calm, calculated, like he knew exactly how this would play out. The house had grown eerily still, the flickering lights now steady but dimmed, the tension crawling across the walls. Clara hugged herself, standing near the base of the staircase as if afraid to go any farther. "We need to find him, or we need to get out before he finds us." But there was no clear way out, and they all knew it. The doors they once used had sealed behind them. Windows had become solid walls. Even their phones, which some had clung to despite knowing they were useless, now showed nothing but static. Victor, his hands shaking slightly, grabbed the closest flashlight and led the way toward the foyer. The others followed in silence. As they neared the place they'd seen Jay standing, the lights above them popped, one by one, down the hallway like falling dominoes. By the time they reached the main entrance, it was pitch black. The screen that had shown Jace flickered off. No trace of him. Amber bent down and examined the floor, brushing dust from fresh footprints that didn't match any of theirs. They led not away from the front door, but deeper into the mansion, toward the east wing. "He wants us to follow," she said, voice low. "He's leading us somewhere." Victor's jaw tightened, or luring us. They moved as a group now, shadows slipping through long corridors that bent in unnatural ways, hallways that seemed longer than before. Every step a code. Every creak underfoot felt like a warning. Somewhere in the distance, a faint humming started, like a machine powering on beneath the floorboards. As they passed through a narrow gallery lined with portraits of strangers, Clara suddenly froze. "Wait!" Her voice was barely a whisper. "That's me?" They'd all turned. One of the portraits, old and cracked, showed a woman seated in a garden, dressed in clothes from another era, but the face, the eyes, were unmistakably Clara's. Eli moved closer, inspecting the label beneath the frame. It was smudged, but one word stood out: guilty. The group fell silent. It wasn't just art, it was a message. Daniel had built more than just a house. He'd built a trap made of their pasts, their choices, their mistakes, and he had documented every one. They kept going, past more portraits, each more disturbing than the last. Victor spotted a boy in military fatigues with a shattered mirror in place of a face. Eli saw a courtroom, empty chairs, but his name carved into the bench. Amber finally stopped in front of a small, flickering screen mounted on a wall. She pressed a button. A video began to play, grainy, black and white. It was a clip from years ago. She was in it, in a control room, just like the one she found earlier, speaking to Daniel. "He's dangerous," she was saying. "You need to stop this." Daniel's voice replied, calm and cold. "They're already in motion. You know how this ends, Amber." The screen went black. Eli stared at her. "You knew him, before all this." She nodded slowly. "I helped him, years ago, with his systems, but I didn't know he was using them for this." Victor took a step toward her, angry. "And you didn't think to tell us?" "I thought he was dead," she said quickly. I thought it was over." A sudden screeching echoed down the hallway behind them, metal against metal, something sliding open. Then the humming intensified. The lights began to pulse, as if sensing with a rhythm none of them could hear. They ran. Through a set of steel doors now wide open, they entered what looked like a theater. Rows of empty seats, a stage at the front. But instead of curtains, there were more screens, dozens of them, showing footage from earlier in the weekend. Every guest, every conversation, every private breakdown. They were all being played back. Victor watched himself confessing to the hit and run in the library. Clara's meltdown in front of the mirror. Eli arguing with someone in his room that no one else ever saw. And Amber, her quiet trips down into the lower levels, searching. From the darkness of the stage, a voice echoed, Daniel's. This was never about redemption. It was about understanding. Who you are when no one is watching, and who you become when you think you're being watched. Then, footsteps. Jay stepped onto the stage, his smile still eerily calm. But now he held something else, a remote. He raised it, pressed a button, and every screen switched to a live feed, a timer, counting down, 10 minutes. "What is this?" Victor demanded. Jace finally spoke. "It's judgment." Amber moved forward, cautious. "You were working with him the whole time?" Jace didn't answer directly. "He gave me a second chance. Said if I could see this through, I could walk away clean. You all." He pointed around the room. "You were here because you ran from the truth. But he built a place where truth has nowhere to hide." As the timer ticked down, a new message appeared beneath it. "Confess or pay the price." Eli turned to the others. "He's bluffing. This is just more manipulation." But Clara was already crying. What if it's not? What if this is the end unless we… Before she could finish, the entire room shuddered, locking them in. The walls vibrated. A siren began to wail, faint at first, then growing louder. Amber looked around. "We have to do something. He's forcing us into something." Jake simply stepped back and said one final word before disappearing behind the curtain. "Decide." And with that, the lights began to dim again, and the countdown continued. each second louder than the last. The countdown echoed louder, each tick pressing down on their nerves like a hammer. Clara backed against the far wall, staring at the screens as her own image flickered. Blurry at first, then sharp. It was a clip from a hospital waiting room. She was pacing, whispering into a phone. A voice on the other end, panicked male, was barely audible. Then came a single word from Clara, dispose. The clip cut out. No, that's not what it looks like, she whispered, but no one moved. The timer on the screen dropped under 6 minutes. The sirens dulled, but only for a second, replaced by a slow, distorted recording of Daniel's voice. Not everyone in this house deserves to walk out alive. Eli gritted his teeth, scanning the walls, trying to trace the wiring. This place, it's not just surveillance. It's a trap that adapts. This whole house is a machine. Amber stepped forward. We're not solving anything standing still. We split up. 2 teams. One looks for a way out. One finds Jace. Her voice was steadier now, sharper, like something had snapped into focus. Victor looked at her warily. You sure you're not just trying to finish what you started with, Daniel? She turned toward him. No, I'm trying to finish what I didn't. He went too far. We built this system to test ethical boundaries, gather data. But he turned it into a weapon, and I should have stopped him before. They split fast, Victor and Clara heading down a hallway lit by flickering red lights, while Amber and Eli took the side door stage left. The mansion groaned again, like it was alive, walls breathing, ceiling twitching. In the hallway, Victor pulled Clara aside. You need to tell me what that video meant. I can't, she whispered. Then we're going to die in here. She looked at him then, really looked. It was about a kid, a patient, my patient. Something went wrong during a clinical trial. He died and I was told to cover it up. But I didn't just cover it. I erased him. His records, his name, I made him disappear. Victor stared at her, and Daniel knew. Clara nodded, tears in her eyes. It was his brother. Elsewhere, Amber led Eli into a narrow hallway that twisted underground, cables snaking along the floor. A hatch in the wall creaked open as they passed, revealing a control room. Blinking servers, cracked monitors. Amber paused, typing fast into one of the terminals. What are you doing? Eli asked. Trying to override the lock system. If I can trigger the backup sequence, the doors upstairs should fail open. But as her fingers moved, a new file opened. One she didn't touch. It played automatically. It showed Eli, younger, in a military uniform, dragging a body across a dirt floor and whispering, "No one will ever know." Amber's breath caught. She looked at him, confused. Who was that? He froze. It wasn't what it looks like. The lights in the room suddenly went out. In the pitch black, a new voice played, one none of them had heard before. A woman's voice, gentle but cold. You were never guests, you were suspects. The game ends when the truth begins. They scrambled out of the control room as a vent opened overhead, releasing thick smoke that filled the tunnel fast. They ran blind, choking, coughing, until they hit a door. Eli kicked it open, and they tumbled into what looked like a replica of the mansion's entryway. But this one was twisted. Upside-down chandeliers, furniture bolted to the ceiling, mirrors where windows should be. Victor and Clara found them there, coughing hard. What is this place? Clara asked. Amber looked around, jaw clenched. The mirror house. It was an experimental design. Daniel used it to disorient test subjects during simulations. But I thought it was dismantled. Then a bell rang. Not a normal bell. A clear, musical chime, followed by Jace's voice. You all made it farther than I expected. But time is a luxury you've lost. The screen above flickered to life. The countdown was gone. In its place, all secrets revealed. All debts collected. Behind the group, a panel in the wall slid open. Inside was a long, curved hallway with individual doors, 5 of them. One for each of them. Their names etched into the wood in fine, gleaming metal. No locks, no handles, just the words, enter to be judged. Victor stepped back. This is it, the final play. Eli shook his head. It's a trap. Amber looked at them all. He's making us face it alone, one at a time. They stared at the doors, and then one more twist. The 6th door opened on its own. Inside, sitting on a chair under a single light, was Daniel. Alive, barely, pale, hollow-eyed. Hooked to a network of wires, monitors displaying his vitals. He looked up slowly, smiling weakly. You came. Amber pushed past the others, entering first. What is this? He spoke softly. I died, technically, 3 years ago. But I had time to finish this, to leave behind what needed to be said. Clara stepped in behind her. "You're not speaking now, are you? This is pre-recorded." Daniel's head tilted. "Mostly." Amber scanned the room, noticing the hardware. The AI system was still running. He programmed this to run itself. Suddenly, all 5 of the personal doors slammed shut. The monitors flickered again, now showing live footage of each room. 1 guest per screen, and then Daniel's voice, now different, more mechanical. "Only one of you walks out." The group froze. That wasn't part of the game. That wasn't what they agreed to. But as the lights dimmed again and the doors locked, it was clear. Daniel's final twist wasn't just judgment, it was punishment. And the house was just getting started. Inside the dim room, Daniel's pale face remained still, eyes fluttering behind heavy lids, as though somewhere between life and memory. The screens above flickered again, this time showing live feeds from inside the 5 sealed rooms. Each guest stood frozen, trapped in silence, each of their names glowing faintly above their respective doors. Amber stepped closer to the central console, hands trembling as she hovered over the digital interface, trying to override whatever Daniel had triggered. The AI system pushed back with sharp beeps and error codes. Victor pounded on his sealed door from the inside, muffled shouts echoing faintly through the thick walls. Clara pressed her palms against the glass of her own room, watching Amber through tear-filled eyes. They were all isolated now, with Daniel's final phase in motion. A voice echoed through hidden speakers, flat and emotionless. "Judgment begins. One secret, one choice, one survivor." Eli's voice came over the intercom from his room. "Amber, you said you helped design this system. There has to be a backdoor." She whispered to herself, "There is, but it requires a sacrifice." The program Daniel left behind had been designed with a singular purpose: to force each participant to face their worst memory and decide whether to confess or conceal. If all 5 chose concealment, the system would purge itself and the mansion completely. But if even one confessed fully, the others would be released, except the one who activated the override. It wasn't a game. It was a final courtroom. Amber knew it, because she helped code it. Clara's screen showed her pacing her room, breathing shallow, before the lights dimmed and a projector lit up. It replayed the boy's face, the patient she had erased. His voice came through the speaker, a playback stitched together from years of recordings. "You said you'd help me. You said I'd get better." Clara broke down, knees hitting the floor. "I didn't know it would kill you. I thought I could fix it." Meanwhile, Victor stared blankly at his feed, where surveillance footage showed him in a warehouse from years ago. A bag of cash, a man on the floor, bleeding from the head. Victor's hands shaking. The recording ended with him running out into the night. He whispered now, "It was supposed to be a scare. I didn't mean to kill them." In his room, Eli stared at a projection of himself during wartime, the camera drone catching the moment he abandoned his unit to save himself. The explosion behind him lit the screen in red. He pressed his forehead to the cold metal wall and whispered, "I was scared. I just wanted to go home." Amber leaned over Daniel's chair, staring down at him as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why would you do this? Why them?" A weak rasp slipped from Daniel's throat, his first true words since they'd entered the final chamber. "Because they forgot. But I didn't." She turned toward the console, Daniel's heart rate monitor flickering in her periphery. The system was waiting for one person to act, to confess completely. She glanced at her own screen, where her file opened without prompt. It showed her in a lab, typing a code, Daniel's eye structure, her voice in a past recording. The system's powerful enough to profile morality in real time, predict justice, even if we're too weak to enforce it. This wasn't just his idea. It was hers too, and she had run from it the moment Daniel pushed it too far. Now, it was back in her hands. She entered the passphrase. "Confess." A countdown started. 10 seconds. The rooms locked tighter, red lights flashing around each door. "Amber, what are you doing?" Eli shouted over the intercom. "Saving the rest of you," she said, voice steady. "But not all of us leave." Daniel opened his eyes then, really opened them, and his mouth twitched into a soft smile. "You remembered." The doors released at once. Clara stumbled out, gasping for air. Victor fell to his knees. Eli held the wall, blinking in disbelief. The screens powered down. But Amber didn't move. Daniel's pulse flattened. The house fell silent. Then, just as they thought it was over, the lights flickered one last time, revealing a final file opening on the central monitor. A message appeared in Daniel's voice, pre-recorded but chillingly calm. "If you're seeing this, then Amber made the choice I always knew she would. But there's one more thing. The experiment wasn't just for them. It was for her. To see if someone who once helped build a monster could be brave enough to destroy it. Amber's image appeared on screen, young, idealistic, pitching the ad to a panel of investors. She whispered, "We could use it to detect guilt before someone even admits it, before they even know it themselves." The message faded. Silence filled the room again. Clara walked to the chair where Amber now sat, still, eyes closed. Peaceful. Victor stared at the terminal. "So, we're free." No one answered. Outside, the front door unlocked with a mechanical click. The sun was rising. They stepped out, one by one, into the morning light, unsure if what they'd survived had actually ended, or if it had only just begun. As they walked down the path away from the mansion, the gates shut behind them, sealing the estate once more. And deep in the control system, behind layers of code, a hidden line of text linked in a dark terminal. Sub-GCTs, RDLDASD. New experiment. Initiated. The house was still watching. The sun felt surreal against their faces as Clara, Victor, and Eli stepped beyond the mansion's looming gate. The wind that swept through the trees was cold, but carried the strange warmth of freedom. They didn't speak at first. None of them quite knew how to. Everything they had just lived through lingered heavily in the air. The house with its wired walls and endless secrets now stood behind them like a closed chapter, one none of them ever wanted to reopen. Yet the silence that followed them was not peace. It was a strange kind of mourning. Eli glanced back one last time. "Do you think it's really over?" Clara shook her head slowly. "I don't think it ever will be. Not for us." For a while they walked. No one knew exactly where the estate was located. Daniel Cross had flown them in blindfolded, driven them in blacked-out SUVs. The road stretched ahead now, but it felt as unfamiliar as the past they'd left behind. It was Victor who finally spoke what they all had been thinking. "She saved us." Amber, the one who had walked back into the same technology she once helped create, the same system she tried to distance herself from when Daniel's idea turned obsessive. They all knew now that she had once been just like Daniel. Not cruel, not calculating, but curious, too confident in tech, and too distant from consequence. That changed when Daniel pushed it further. She left him then. Maybe that's when he started building this mansion, this experiment, on his own. But Amber didn't abandon it completely. Somewhere inside her, guilt grew louder than fear. And when she got Daniel's invitation, maybe she saw it as her second chance. Clara, still visibly shaken, paused near a fallen tree on the roadside and sat down. "I thought I'd buried it," she said quietly. "That mistake, that boy. But it was there, like it just happened yesterday." Eli crouched beside her. "We all thought we left things behind. But the house, it was built to remember, to remind." Victor stood nearby, staring at the thick woods. And what if that house doesn't stop? What if there are more guests? Another group someday? The thought hummed between them. None of them wanted to think about someone else facing what they just had, but they knew Daniel, and they knew how obsessed he was with his vision of justice. Eli rubbed his face. Amber stopped at once. She put herself on the line. "If we walk away and never talk about this again, then it starts all over." Clara looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "But who would believe us?" Victor reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "Amber gave this to me before she went into the control room. She said, if this works, use it right." Eli's eyes widened. "What's on it?" Victor shrugged. "Don't know yet. But if I had to guess, probably everything. Records, blueprints, their files, our confessions, the whole system." Clara hesitated. "If we release that, we destroy Daniel's legacy. We expose ourselves too." Victor met her gaze. "That's exactly why we have to. No more secrets." Later that night, they found their way to a small-town bus station on the edge of a sleepy highway. A payphone buzzed in the corner. Clara called her sister, her voice trembling as she said, "I'm coming home." Eli bought a newspaper and stared at the headlines, suddenly seeing the world differently. Every article about power or silence or justice echoing their own twisted experience. Victor, sitting at a booth in the corner, opened a laptop and inserted the flash drive. The screen lit up immediately. Folders upon folders appeared, each labeled with timestamps, surveillance tags, voice transcripts. One folder was labeled Final Override, Amber Transcript. Another said Justice Sequence, Phase 2, pending. He didn't open them. Not yet. He just stared. Eventually, he closed the laptop and looked out the window. Outside, people laughed, ate, walked by without worry. They didn't know what had almost been done in the name of truth. They didn't know how close someone like Daniel Cross had come to replacing courts and juries with algorithms and locked rooms. Clara joined him. "You still thinking about what to do with it?" He nodded. "Every second." "Whatever you decide," she said gently, "just don't carry it alone." He smiled weakly. "None of us should." The next morning, 3 news outlets received anonymous packages. Inside each was a copy of the drive and a letter written by Amber. It read, "We all believe we're the hero of our own story until someone shows us the whole truth. What happened in that house wasn't punishment. It was a test. For us, for technology, for justice. It's time the world sees what we try to hide behind systems and screens. The future doesn't belong to the ones who control data. It belongs to those brave enough to tell the truth, no matter the cost." Amber's name was never mentioned again in headlines, but whispers of her story passed around late-night shows, podcasts, and online threads. Conspiracy or confession? Social experiment or psychological trap? Some doubted it all. Others called her a modern-day martyr for digital ethics. The truth was harder to pin down than ever, but it lingered. Clara returned to her clinic, but this time with more listening and less control. Eli took a job helping veterans transition into civilian life. Victor disappeared for a while, but eventually launched a nonprofit focused on tech responsibility. They stayed in touch, not often, but enough. 1 year later, a new mansion, sleek, modern, deep in Colorado woods, appeared in satellite images. Hidden from roads, built by a shell company no one had heard of. And just outside its private gates, buried in the soil, someone placed a small plaque. It read, "Let those who watch remember what happens when they stop being human." No one knows who left it. Maybe it was one of the survivors. Maybe someone who believed the experiment should never continue. Or maybe, just maybe, someone new was watching and learning. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about change. And sometimes the scariest part of the truth isn't what's been done, but who we become when we're finally forced to face it. The mansion stands, quiet, waiting, and the world keeps turning.